All right, welcome Warhammer YouTubers. It's Hooves of Doom with Mrs. Hooves. And this is a little bit of a family intervention, if you will, about hobby hoarding.
It's going to be such a intense topic. Perhaps you'd like a glass of scotch as we...
A glass of scotch, you say? Yes. Sure, why not?
Okay.
What do you got? I guess we got a few options on the mantle.
What would you like? I'm going to have this one.
Give me that 16-year one.
Alright, I'll have that too.
Alright. I like that the other day. It was nice.
It is nice.
We have a plethora of whiskey available. Our dog keeps knocking out the old power cord here. Brilliant work, buddy. Bud. All right. We'll get to this video eventually. Here. All right. So we got some whiskey. That's a good start to any conversation. So it's just after Christmas 2020. I hope to change things up in the new year because I have a kind of a developing reputation.
Developing? Or developed?
Yeah, developed, probably reputation as being
Just checking.
kind of a hobby hoarder. Nikki, you can't play with that ball during the video. Come here.
We're not playing ball right now. There.
Stop that.
Go lay down. Go lay down.
This is off to a great start here. And I recognize to some extent that it's somewhat of a problem. That I've lost a good degree of focus. That the collection just seems to be growing at a prodigious pace. More models this year than any other previous year.
Yep.
You know, I usually have a hobby room that takes over the master bedroom. This year in this house I now have basically 2 hobby rooms or 2 hobby spaces.
But I got my master bedroom back.
Well, that's true. So it's a bonus. You know, it's not so bad. We still have a spare bedroom this time. So but even I recognize that maybe I'm taking my collecting ambitions a little too far ahead of anything that's realistic. So the basic stats at this point are a little over 7,000 models, about 180,000 points, which by most standards is exorbitantly large, and only about 1,200 maybe painted models. So kind of a ridiculous proportion of just gray plastic, which, yeah, I think I need to change that up a little bit. It's, even I recognize when I buy stuff that, like, oh boy, this was a bad idea to be buying more stuff.
Well, I think we have to investigate what hoarding means. So I think you have to define that a little bit.
See, I've always hated this term hobby hoarder. Like, I've pushed back against it a lot. And now I'm like, you know what? If anyone's a hobby hoarder, I'm probably a pretty good candidate for it. By most
But why
standards.
are you? What characteristics do you have that make you a hobby hoarder?
Purchasing more than I can paint.
Okay, so you have a lot of purchased items that aren't ready to play with.
Yeah.
They're not painted. Some of them aren't even put together.
That is incorrect.
Really?
I want to push back against that point.
Oh, okay. Have you put them all together now?
I will say, you know, a lot of people have piles of unassembled models, right? Like the so-called pile of shame is envisioned as a pile of boxes. It's either pile of shame or a pile of opportunity, people call it. Mm-hmm. And people have like these, you know, cabinets just full of boxes of Warhammer. Now, I'm not that bad, okay? 2 or 3 years ago now, I decided, you know what? Enough is of that. I can at least get that part put together. So, of my 7,000 models,
Mm-hmm.
only like 10 or 15 are not assembled.
10 or 15 models?
10 or 15 models.
Really? So
Yeah.
that could be done this week.
Well, they're all complicated models.
Just asking.
Yeah, well, a lot of people paint in sub-assemblies, right? And those are models that are either just like really finicky, they're like resin or metal, or I just want to make sure that I do get a coat of paint on a couple of those models, because assembling them completely will make it really difficult to paint. So that's the only exceptions, and there are very few numbers. So I will say that I've at least put the effort into reducing my IQ by about 50 points by inhaling all those
Exactly.
fumes from glue, but I have assembled 99% of the collection. So that's a step
Okay,
ahead
that's
of
a
the average
plus.
hobby hoarder, okay?
That's a plus
Those
in your
losers that
favor.
can't assemble their own models.
Yeah. Let's move on and talk about the painting aspect.
Well, and that's, yeah, okay, we can talk about that.
Do you have statistics on that as well?
I do, and, I think right now it's about 15% of the collection.
That is painted?
That is painted, yeah.
That's pretty poor.
That's
saying.
that's pretty poor. It's actually even though I've been painting probably more in the last 4 or 5 years.
You have. That's what it seemed like to me.
And I've kind of increased my quality a little bit.
You continue to purchase. That's
I
the
continue, and
problem.
my purchasing really outstrips the painting significantly. Like even in periods of the hobby where I'm not actually engaged, I'm not making videos, I'm not even playing games, I'm still buying stuff. And so that's been the hurdle that and so that's a problem. I will admit that.
Would you say that would fit with the definition of a hobby hoarder? Someone who has lots of assembled models, but not painted. Not ready to play. You can't go to a tournament with those.
Well, true. I can play in the basement. I can't play.
You can play in the basement.
But
this is true.
I would also, to my shame, just point out I don't have a lot of the current rules, so the armies can't even be played. So yeah, no, that's definitely.
So are you saying that goes on the to be purchased column?
Yeah, but books I think are a different thing.
So we're not including books. We're just talking about models as far as hobby hoarding.
Yeah. I think so. I think books are, providing you're reading the books and that you don't just grab them and go, okay, straight on the bookshelf.
I would expect a librarian to say that. Yes.
Well, yeah, let's hope so. It is, that one of the weird realities about this hobby at this point is, back when I first got into the hobby, I think you could conceivably buy everything and enjoy everything, and now that's impossible, right? The Games Workshop just produces too much on a weekly basis.
Does that still remain your goal then?
I think that remnant hasn't left me. And so that's...
And so how will you know when this hobby is complete?
Well, the hobby's never complete. I call my... I'm building like a model database of Games Workshop, and I call that the collecting abyss. That's what it's called on my computer. Because
to be fair, I think that's true no matter what your hobby or your collection is. True collectors, I don't think, ever stop collecting.
No, and I think that's true. And I've always had this mentality from, when I played Magic the Gathering and past collections, even when I was a stamp collector as a kid. It's always just been my...
Yes, he's always been a nerd.
Yeah, well, fair enough. Well, that was obvious.
So I.
But even like something like World of Warcraft, I played all the classes and all the specs simultaneously. I never developed the idea of a main character, as you pretty much well know. Mm-hmm. And that was a problem when you're playing the game, because you basically get nowhere.
And yet you're playing 24/7.
Yeah, all my characters are pretty well geared, but not as geared as well as if I focused on one guy. And it's the same with the hobby, right? Like,
seems to me that just sucks the fun right out of it.
Yeah, it does. I come up with these weird ideas on how to manage things, and I think it just ends up accomplishing nothing. Like I made all these purchases for Christmas and purchases in the last part of 2020, and I feel like ultimately none of those ends up being an army at all. You also get this weird thing when you have so many models because the armies don't make sense. They all blend together. Like one model then can be used in 4 or 5 different armies. Think of demons, right? They can be used in 40k, they can be used in AOS, they can be combined armies, they can be pure armies. There's just a lot of stuff that blurs the lines.
It's versatility, but is that what you really want when you're thinking about playing the game? Not that playing the game is the end all and be all, because I think the creative aspect of painting and building has great value, but
I just think I need greater focus. When I first got into the hobby, I still had the collecting ambition. Collector's really kind of what I've styled myself as, more of a gamer, or less of a gamer. And when I first got in, I just played the Space Marines. And everyone I knew played Space Marines.
I'm glad I didn't know you then, because I wouldn't have played.
And my collecting ambition at that time was just to basically have all the Space Marine armies. And then I got some of the Xenos armies, Eldar and things like that. And then I got into fantasy, and it just kind of spiraled out of control. Like, I can remember distinctly a time when I had, 2 fantasy armies. And now I have, 30, right? And so it just... I don't know,
I have another question for you.
Yes, continue.
Regarding whether you are a hoarder or not.
All right.
I think you have to think about how much you've purchased in relation to how much you've sold over the years.
Well, I don't sell armies.
Okay.
A lot of people cycle
answers
armies.
My question.
Yeah, well, that's what makes me. That's why I have so much, right? The collection only grows. A lot of people cycle armies. They buy, they then sell, they buy something else. I don't like that idea at all.
What about giving some away to someone who may be new to the hobby and needs kind of that boost to get going?
I can see little Timmy that wants models.
I can see the angst.
Yeah, he's not going to enjoy them as much as I would. You know?
Right.
I think for both of those, the IKEA effect is a big deal for me. You take a lot of enjoyment and value in building something that you love. And all my models have a story. I will admit some of the more recent years where it's been
just purchasing.
A lot of aggressive purchasing. Though I don't really care as much about those, but a lot of the early models definitely have a story to me that I don't want to sell. I don't want to give up on. And I sold my Black Templar army. Oh boy, 20 years ago now.
Now
and I'm
wish you had
still scarred by that. I still think, I wonder if I can find it on eBay and get it back. It's 20 years. I gotta let that go. It was really badly painted.
But the beginning, that also tells a story.
But most people, there are certain people in the Warhammer world that can sell stuff and they don't care, and that's not me. Again, I sold Necron Warriors when I was in college, 1 unit, and I'm still I wish I had those because they were cool models and they're old models that. And I remember opening them for the first time and looking at them for the first time.
That's the look you get when you open them now.
True. Well, I can visualize it. I was in my parents' basement 20 years ago, looking
Still
at that box.
Basement, huh?
Yeah, well, obviously. Staring at that box of Necron Warriors and thinking that I'd betrayed the Emperor because all my armies up to that point were Imperial, and now I'd gone down this Xenos alien army. I felt really bad. And I selling those made sense to me before that reason. But now I'm I wish I had those models back. Because now I've got to search on eBay for them, or something, not that unit, but a unit like it, and it's just bad decision, I think.
So bottom line, would you consider yourself a hobby hoarder? Straight up answer.
Yes, I would, unfortunately. I do want to put some caveats, though. I have assembled everything, like I said. I think that stands for something. And I have painted more models than the average gamer. But
you have so many to paint.
Well, that's fair. Fair. Okay. But proportionally, and this year especially, I really feel like, I really kind of lost control this year in some ways.
I think since we know we're not moving again, not anytime soon, fire's going out.
Do you want to fix the fire?
No, I wanted you to.
You want me to fix the fire? All right, I'll edit this part out. Okay, fire is going again now, to some extent. We'll see how long it goes. I like these little fireside chats. This is a fun little format.
Yeah, I like it.
So what's your general sense of, like, me in the hobby? Like, it's positive, right?
I love the hobby. I think it provides not just gaming, it provides creativity, intellect, being able to paint, I think, is a huge thing. That's a part I wish I could do. I just don't feel confident. I don't feel like I'm that good at it. And I know I've heard people say, with practice you get better. Maybe I would.
Yeah.
But I value all of those pieces. What I don't like is just having things to have them. I've never liked that. I feel like there has to be a use for something. So if you're painting, if you're actually using them for gaming, I think that's a positive thing. But if you're just collecting to say that you've got whatever the newest cool model is,
the biggest collector of them all.
I don't value that at all. So, in fact, I kind of scorn that, actually.
Oh, scorn.
Scorn.
Okay.
Okay.
Those are strong words.
Yeah. I don't like collecting just to collect. There has to be a purpose.
Yeah, I think that mindless collecting,
which
is part of it.
I think that's how you go down the slippery slope.
Yeah.
You start just collecting to collect, and then you're left with, a collection that's not useful. Yeah. You can't play with it. You can't.
Every
you
time
really look at it with joy because it's not painted. So.
Every time I make any purchase, I have an aspiration to play with it, but it becomes more and more ridiculous. When you kind of quickly realize, like, I could play with a different army every single week for an entire year and probably not cycle through them, and put every single model on the table. And so that does kind of put things into perspective for me, and I definitely do think I've lost that focus.
So, I guess you don't want to talk about solutions to these problems today.
Well, no.
We can chat about that later.
No, we can chat about that. Yeah. So, what do you think is the best solution to this? Because I know you've talked to me about giving stuff away or selling some things.
Or trying to share the joy that you have for the hobby, not just in saying I have these, but sharing that gameplay, or even painting. I love that you painted online with people, when we're talking and while you painted. I think that's awesome because I think that's just community, and I think that's a good thing that comes out of it. But even helping kind of a fledgling player, because you're very good at teaching the game. I'm not so good at learning when it comes to numbers. That's the hardest part for me. I do love to play, but I do feel like I have a handicap as far as the numbers go. They don't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So, but I think you could find someone who it did make sense with and kind of bring them along in the hobby. And to do that, I think you'd have to share your collection. and maybe even give some things away. Just saying.
I don't know. I don't
Just
know.
something to think
Don't know
about.
Fair enough.
And I don't want anyone to think I have someone in mind, because I don't. I wouldn't know who
Yeah.
would be someone who might be interested or who would value the game as much as you do. I think that would be important. It would have to be someone who has the same kind of passion for the game that you do. Because you have a passion not just for the miniatures, but also for the histories in the universe, and so there's a lot more to it for you. It's a very intellectual thing for you, and so I think you'd have to find the right match to be able to help someone along.
Yeah, I need a young little a Padawan or something.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I don't know.
Just saying, I think it might increase your level of enjoyment to be able to teach to someone who's passionate about it.
Fair enough. Well, there's not much of an AOS community here in Maine. 40K is doing well here. So maybe I'll try to start kind of the AOS community at the local store.
I think that's an awesome idea.
Like, I don't even think there's a Facebook group like in this state for Age of Sigmar.
But they have a Games Workshop store.
They do, and according to him, people do play there. Well, used to before COVID, and do buy Age of Sigmar there. But it just doesn't seem to be that visible. And I know even at the local store here, when, what was it, 3-4 years ago when we last lived in Rochester, New Hampshire? It was 4 years ago. 4 or 5 years ago.
5. Oh, he just turned 5. So 5.
There was a guy I saw perusing the Age of Sigmar collection then at the store, and I asked him, "Hey, do you play the game?" They mostly seem to play at home and less openly. They're ashamed of their hobby.
Well, like me, probably not totally confident in their game playing skills. So
yeah, and I think Garage Hammer, your brother, is much larger of a thing than people in the more widespread open community tend to take for granted. That there's a lot of players out there that clearly play the game but are not synced into what's going on in the community at any given time. They're not attending tournaments and stuff.
I have another question for you. If there was no one near where you live, is that something you could do online as a kind of a teaching, get into Warhammer kind of?
Possibly.
Just that idea just popped in my head.
Well, why not? I mean, it's always something to kind of explore. And people make videos about how to get into your first army and what the first purchases and things like that.
But would it be you and that person
it's
interacting?
It's not a one-on-one mentorship.
That's what I would think. Like a one-on-one mentorship would be a great idea.
Yeah, like a Warhammer Masterclass or something.
Yeah, there you go. I think you have a lot of work on the database, so I don't know if you have time for that. But.
Yeah, well, that would be my biggest thing. I'm not a people have commented on some of my videos, like, how do I get into this hobby and things like that, and I do take some time to respond to those comments. But in general, I think there are better channels more suited towards entry-level players.
I think maybe I think like that because I am a teacher. I mean, I've been a teacher my whole life, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But I think about that. If I have knowledge, I want to impart that knowledge to someone else. I want to give it and inspire them to the same joy I feel on a topic or... So, I don't know.
Yeah, and I try to be kind of a positive voice in terms of my videos. Like there's plenty of things that you can kind of nitpick, be a little bit angry about, but in general, I much prefer positivity than angry videos.
Me too.
So, I do want to put forward a positive-looking face. I want to encourage new players because new blood is always good, and I'm very much aware now that seems like the average gamer in the hobby is like 35, And that strikes me as probably a little more of a balance.
How would you say that's changed over time? So would you say that's not always been the case?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I got into it when I was 18, and I feel like that was a cohort of people that have carried on through, like the Hero Quest generation that engaged with that game when they were 10 to 12 years old, maybe a little younger, then kind of progressed, and we all jumped on the game roughly around the same time, and there's a lot of us. And I look at, certainly my analytics on my channel would seem to suggest that, the average viewer of me at least is around 30 to 45 years old. And, there's certain benefits to that type of demographic. They probably have more disposable money, which Games Workshop likes.
That's true.
But, I wonder about, it seems like the younger generations need a good on-ramp. And I'm Games Workshop produces in some ways too much material nowadays, and it works too fast. I wish editions of the game lasted 4 or 5 years rather than 2. And I kind of wish that they just didn't produce as much content on a weekly basis. That would certainly help my collecting itch if they didn't. But I totally recognize
that as a company they can't.
No, it's
they
good
can't
for
look
them.
at it that
Right?
way,
They're making tons of money.
Yeah.
And if you're only interested in 1 or 2 armies, this is the best conceivable time because you're not left waiting years and years for an update. You get an update every 1 or 2 years, and it's a pretty fast-paced environment. Even then, still people complain about the fact that their armies haven't gotten the attention that they deserve. But I look at nowadays as being like this juggernaut of content, that it just produces ludicrous amounts of new product weekly, which is just insane. And that definitely doesn't help the hobby hoarder in me, to get back on topic, because it does
just
feel
a little
like
path to the side.
it's fun. We can just meander. We can talk about whatever we want.
Yeah. Feel free to hit the off button.
Don't do that. Keep watching.
My feelings will not be hurt.
Yeah. I don't know. I definitely do feel like there's a mixed bag here at the moment, that there are pros and cons to what's going on in Warhammer. It's probably more popular than ever, but that comes with some negative consequences too. And from my perspective, the desire to kind of own every army has in some way taken over any other desire I have. Like you can't be a prolific collector that owns multiple armies and be good at the armies. Like, because you just can't focus on it. Like I said, I could switch up armies every single week for an entire year and probably still not explore close to the varied complexity of each individual army. So like I'm in some ways I have all these armies, and yet I'm truly knowledgeable about none of them. Unlike someone that just plays Skaven or just plays Khorne, right? They've, I'm amazed by the people that say that they've played hundreds of games with one army.
Which is why I tell you, I don't like switching. When we play, I like to play the same thing because I feel like the more I play with that one army, the better I'm going to be at strategizing what I need to do, rather than constantly having to look to see what I want to do.
Yeah.
The
solution there is also just to play more games. Like I think we sometimes play like one game and then we play another game 6 months later.
Right.
And by then I'm also confused about like double turn. What's that about? Like
I agree. I think we need to play more.
Yeah.
I think we have since we've
gotten here.
We have a place
new
to play.
Space.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to it. It's pretty nice.
I'm enjoying it.
Okay.
So.
And I want to play different armies for the purposes of understanding their mechanics and kind of get, because you can read the army book.
Too. I get that too.
But actually
It's
playing
not
it
gonna
is
be me.
kind of a different level of understanding.
Yeah.
To actually see how the rules are playing out. You can think, okay, that rule's really good, and they would definitely get tons of attacks. But to actually visualize all the dice and the damage they do on the table just provides some insight to it. Because sometimes things look better on paper than they do sometimes on the table, or you realize that, boy, those points just don't quite add up the way that they should.
Or I wish I'd brought whatever instead of a...
Yeah, and certainly in this scenario it would have been better to have more models or less models. And how feasible is it to play with this giant army with 150 models versus this one that has 50? So those types of things you only learn by repeatedly playing, and that's something I want to focus more on. So what do you think is the ultimate solution here, apart from giving models away and selling stuff? Because I honestly, that's a hard thing for me to do.
I know.
I've put these all together.
Can you share it? I guess that's without giving it away necessarily or selling it. Can you share it somehow?
I mean, if a new player were to come over, I would definitely allow them to use one of my armies. Like that's not a problem for me.
That's not quite what I was talking about.
Well, I don't know what you mean by share.
I want you to share the passion that you have and kind of instill that passion into someone else who may be just starting out.
Isn't that what Hooves of Doom is all about? No? Is there something else?
I guess. You do that too.
Yeah, and I think my collecting resource that I'm building, I put a ton of hours into this month. That is something that I think is, ironically, very much in the Hobby Hoarder vein, but a positive development for that, right? I think it will reach a wider audience, and I might do some more frequent tweets about different models
to be able to interact with other people.
And that is the positive aspect of collecting.
Yeah. And I honestly, to be perfectly honest, I really don't think you're a hoarder in the classic terms. You don't have stuff just to have it. You do enjoy. You have a great love for this game.
Yeah.
And this hobby, and I feel like.
My vision of a hoarder is someone that is just rampantly out of control and just has tons of stuff piled everywhere. And that I would definitely say I'm a little out of control, but
I would agree with that. I think that you just have to constantly remind yourself not to become that hoarder.
It's definitely there, and I feel that psychologically.
Yeah.
It's like, all right.
But in some ways it's been good because it prompts you to set certain goals to move forward, like painting so much. Even though sometimes those goals don't get met, you can still revisit those and try to get back on board.
And I will say, I'm extraordinarily well organized.
That's very true.
I probably deal with more Excel sheets than I probably should healthily do.
You're a librarian.
Yeah,
you can't help it.
Well, I guess that's part of the mental schema as well. But and everything's very well organized in labeled bins, and like I said, it's all assembled. I still
very well organized. Yeah,
it is sometimes hard to find things, but I think that's more because of the size of the collection than anything I could do on organizational level. So I think there are some positive steps here. I'm not completely lost. I'm not a lost case, and
I just thought it was important to chat about that and to kind of think through it.
Fair enough. Yeah. I do think if I had unassembled stuff, I would consider selling that, because that turnaround doesn't matter, and you're just selling a box that you could potentially buy at a later point. But the assembled models mean something to me. I've already invested some of my time into them.
Right.
And it's always been my aspiration to paint everything, even though cognitively that probably doesn't make a lot of sense at this point.
But I think it does.
I can get closer, right?
It does. I think you just have to continue to move forward and be very conscious about when you're making a purchase. Do you have time for that purchase? Does it make sense in whatever your current goal is?
Yeah. So what do you think? You enjoyed this little chat?
Yeah, it was great. Thanks for including me.
All right. I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Please consider supporting the channel by commenting on the video, hitting that little like button, and subscribing for more Warhammer content.